Okay, I feel like I just met Jeff Bezos. Not really, but I'm telling you, I speak with startups and entrepreneurs all the time, and this gentleman is special. I'd like you to meet Daniel Vassallo. We got together to discuss his acquisition of userbase.com and why he spent 25% of his entire startup budget on a premium.com, not just for any startup, but a B2B startup, which generally spend less on their domains than a B2C. This interview is so much more than that. Daniel has very unique perspectives on business. He discusses how he made 70K off an ebook he just launched a couple months ago, and how he proactively built his Twitter audience to 22,000 followers in a year. I hope you enjoy the show and meeting Daniel just as much as I did.
FD was built by domain investors to increase your inquiries, sales, and profit. Forget spreadsheets and archived emails. Manage your entire investment portfolio in one place using a secure and completely confidential platform. Learn more at ft.com. That's EFTY, ft.com.
Hey, Sherpa Network. I'm Tess Diaz, executive producer of DomainSherpa.com. And today we have a founder and entrepreneur here to tell his story about upgrading to the best version of a .com. Joining us is Daniel Vassallo of userbase.com. Hi, Daniel. How you doing?
Hi, Tess. Thank you for having me. Very good, thanks.
Oh, it's a delight to have you. So you have founded this company, self-funded. Sounds very enterprising. And it sounds like it was part of your plan. You developed it on userbase.dev. And then before launch, just about 10, 12 weeks ago, you transitioned to userbase.com. Is that right?
Correct, yeah. So getting the .com wasn't part of the plan originally. I had settled on Userbase after brainstorming some name ideas, and the only thing I looked for was that there weren't any businesses that I could see running. I did a trademark search. The trademark was available. I filed the trademark paperwork, and I acquired the .dev because I saw that the .com was unavailable, and I didn't pursue it. I didn't think it was important for me. This was a B2B business, is a B2B business for other software developers. And sort of initially, I didn't think that the .com was essential. Actually, I still think it's still not essential, but we'll talk about it. I chose to buy it anyway. So it started with the plan to launch with the .com, then sort of the opportunity arose with the .dev, and then the opportunity arose to buy the .com. And this was a bit of a dilemma because, first of all, I had never bought a domain before. This wasn't sort of the regular $9.99, $12.99 available on the market, and I had a fixed budget for this. This was still an experiment, right? I had set some. I had some money of how much I wanted to invest, and buying the .com was going to be a significant portion of that budget. And I was sort of reluctant to exceed it. I wanted to stay disciplined and not sort of make a bigger investment than I wanted to sort of tolerate potentially losing, right? Because the business hadn't even launched yet when I bought the .com, right? So it was a very speculative bet, right? That it's going to hopefully pay off in the long term.
Yeah, and I'd really like to pick your brain about that, because a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the B2B business, don't see a reason for the best version of .com of their brand or domain. And it's really interesting, and especially being self-funded, you have a very limited budget, and that you chose to invest a significant portion in this. Let's walk through that thought process. But first, so you came over from about 8 years as a software engineer for Amazon?
Correct, yes.
Okay, tell me a little bit what you did over at Amazon.
Yeah, so I was working in the cloud computing division. It's basically the wing of Amazon that builds software for other software developers to build their own websites and web applications on top of it. So I wasn't part of the Amazon.com, the e-commerce side. Right? It was more on the technology side. And yeah, 8.5 years, and I was building. Mostly my customers at Amazon were other software developers, and sort of I really enjoyed that space. And this is also what Userbase is doing, helping other web developers build web applications very easily without having to set up servers, databases, and deal with security and other complicated things. And yeah, so my journey at Amazon was, I mean, I think it was good by many measures. I was very well compensated. I got promoted many times. So sort of I had my own reputation there. Things were working very well. But I think something clicked in me probably nearly about 5 years ago. Right? So it started, I think, in my midpoint in the journey there. But I think I realized that probably a career as a full-time employee wasn't the ideal path for me. I was basically looking at other people that had been there 10 years, 20 years, right? And I didn't really envy their position. And don't get me wrong, like, it's not like they were tremendously skilled people, very knowledgeable. I would have envied their their knowledge and skills, but sort of their day-to-day job, I didn't see myself being satisfied and rewarded doing that. And it has been mostly been a mental process of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, what other universe could exist that would be better for me. And I think initially I was considering many people, many of my peers that had left to do something on their own typically would have gone the Silicon Valley route, I call it. So they start a business, they try to get VC funding to build something big. And initially I think my idea was well inclined towards that path, but I think then I also realized that would have probably have come with similar burdens, if not even more than just full-time employment, because once you take investments, you're still essentially reporting to someone, and probably even more, right? Because at least, when you're employed, you could always leave, right? If you're 2 weeks notice. But if you were to take something like that, you're probably more restricted, right, with what you can do if things are not working out. So my mental process evolved to imagining a bootstrapped path, right, where I'm building something on my own, where I'm self-funding it. I call my own shots. I don't have to sort of I could take it how I wanted to, pursue things that I want, not pursue things that I'd rather not pursue. And that's basically what I ended up doing. I pretty much left my job without a concrete plan, right? So I knew that I was going to live off my savings for a while. I spent some time just researching ideas. I started building an audience a little bit, mostly on Twitter. Initially, I started blogging, but then sort of I settled on documenting my journey on Twitter, and it sort of formed a little bit of a community of other people interested in following someone else doing something like this. And that helped a lot, right? Because sort of there's somebody listening now. It's not like I'm doing things and just releasing them into the void. Like, I get feedback. And incidentally, the name Userbase came from somebody suggested it, right? Actually, I was still brainstorming online, literally in the open. I had some other ideas. And anyway, long story short, this has been my path. Like, pretty much 2019 had been, in February, I left my job and sort of spent a few months brainstorming, came up with this business idea, had been developing pretty much until the end of the year, released the first version in late January of this year, so a couple of months ago. And now I intend to keep growing it, keep sort of working on it. There's still lots more to do. But that's basically it
That's really unusual. You started out with the idea of being an entrepreneur, I mean, most people start with an idea, a problem they want to fix, a product they want to sell, or a service. You started out with a lifestyle you wanted to pursue, and step by step have gone about it. That's
No,
that's
absolutely. And I think I think you described it correctly. Like it was this change had been a life. I wanted to basically. I realized that when I was a full-time employee, that my lifestyle wouldn't have changed. There was basically very room for improvement, regardless of how much more I was getting compensated or how much more I was getting promoted. And this was an attempt to design my lifestyle in a way that better matches my preferences, right? Where yes, I have more freedom to do things. But I completely see it that way. That I think it's I prefer starting with my constraints and my preferences and arriving to an idea as a result of those things, rather than I think it's more likely to succeed as well, right? I think if the approach where you have your idea and you try to do it at all costs, I think it's a potentially insidious trap of risking more than you intend to risk, right? And you just get, so tied to that idea that you start taking imprudent risks, right? And I basically tried to arrive to the idea by starting with, first of all, what can I afford to build, right? Because not everything I could do by myself. What are my interests, which was another important thing. I wanted to do something that I would like to continue doing for a long time. And again, like what matches my skills in terms of what I can promote and keep operating and things like that. Right? So it was a process of elimination more than a big light bulb moment where I just say, this is it. This is my life's work. I'm going to do it at all costs, no matter what.
Yeah, that's really unique thinking, and very forward thinking, and somewhat some might say visionary, to see yourself in the bigger picture like that. So tell me, Daniel, at what point did you recognize, well, first of all, actually, so you started on a .dev, which like, you are the ultimate geek. You are every geek's dream, right? First of all, you're a native of Malta, which is like geek headquarters. It's like an island full of developers, right? I mean, I know everyone in the casino industry loves being there, the gaming industry. I mean, I picture like your nightclubs as like the Matrix and people like coding while they dance or something crazy. I don't know. And then you move from there to Amazon. And after 8.5 years at Amazon, you're still in the Seattle area, which is pretty much, I mean, geek headquarters, USA. So I think, first of all, just being surrounded by that ecosystem for so long must affect your way of thinking, all your perceptions. But .dev, not every, may surprise you, but not everyone knows about .dev. So, it's for developers. How did you get a .dev in the first place? Just real quick.
Oh, no. To be honest, I didn't care much about the domain. Initially, I was considering even something that wasn't the exact name, like get user base or something like that, or try use base, some of these other creative ideas. I had heard, I knew several developers that had been getting the .dev when Google announced it. I think, I don't remember, it was probably
about a year ago, February 2019.
So yeah, I didn't think much about it. I looked it up, it was available, and I grabbed it. The type of business that I have, it was the one that I was imagining, that business and customers are unlikely to be coming in from not even search engines, or not even from, it was mostly word of mouth and high touch onboarding, right? So I didn't really think that having the signal of a good domain mattered much at that time, right? Then sort of my thinking evolved a little bit on that aspect. But yeah, initially I didn't think much of it, and I was very happy. Like I had a domain, and I didn't think much about it. Then what happened? If you want me to get into it, like out of curiosity, I was talking with someone online that's sort of a bit of a domain geek, and sort of he mentioned to me that I might want to look at acquiring the .com, and he recommended a broker. And again, like I thought, let's give it a shot. And I had a very low budget. I thought, I was already starting to feel that that there might be some benefits that wasn't necessarily in terms of discoverability, right? Which is what at the time, that's what I thought the .com mattered most. But I thought, then I was starting to think that just having the .com was just a signal that this is not some hobby project that I built in the weekends that I just threw out there. Like I invested a significant amount of money in it. This was something real and professional. And I was already starting to think about that the .com might signal that, right? That somebody using it might say, okay, again, like this is not potentially something smaller, that's subconscious.
Fly by night company that's
exactly right, and especially in this space, there's lots of that, right? Like very weekend projects, we call them. Like somebody puts it out there, if it sticks, we'll see. It was definitely not the case. But I didn't know what to expect. I had absolutely no idea whether something like userbase.com would go for $5,000 or $100,000. I had absolutely no clue. So I reached out to this broker, and he indicated that the price would likely be between 20,000 and so on and so forth. There was a $1,000 fee with the broker to do the initial and to try to reach out to the owner, and I paid it again. At most it would have been just an experience, like to learn and understand. Long story short, the broker managed to reach out to the owner, and the owner was asking for $100,000, which was beyond what I was expecting. And again, like I didn't really know whether it was the right value or whatever, but it was definitely outside of what I was willing to spend. $100,000 was basically the full budget that I had for this project, right? So that's how much I had allocated in terms of how much I was going to invest in terms of initial development, right? And then basically I forgot about it, right? But I did a Whois lookup, and I realized that it was going to expire. This is a really funny story, right? And I don't know how common it is, but it was going to expire in about 3 weeks. Right? So this happened in early November, like when I reached to the broker, and it was going to expire, I think, on the 28th November. And I set a monitor with GoDaddy to get alerted just in case it expired again. Like my complete ignorance about how all these things work, I just set this up, paid the fee, whatever it was, $20 or whatever, to set this up. And to my surprise, like sometime in December, I got an email that this had expired, which to me sounded quite unbelievable, that somebody was asking me for $100,000 for it.
Yeah.
Just 5 weeks before. And I was obviously I could participate in the auction. And again, like I was trying to, basically I realized that this was probably my only opportunity, or it was very unlikely that I was going to be able to buy it at a low price or a lowish price ever again. Like, so it was one of the reasons why I chose to end up doing it, just because it was an opportunity, right? And I was starting again to realize that even though, as we touched on before, like even though I don't think the .com is important for discoverability purposes in my business, the type of business that I have is that I'm expecting quite a lot of trust from my customers. I'm holding the data for their websites and their web applications, right? And sort of, I started to think again, like whether the signaling of like this is something, that there's money invested in, right? That this is, basically, I was imagining that if I was able to, purchase an expensive domain, this is definitely not not something that I'm just doing with no.
Yeah, you're right. Domains signal trust. And if that's important in your B2B relationships, that's
I think
a great way, especially starting out, to immediately set that expectation, and also to differentiate yourself from the other weekend projects that are out there.
And I think the dilemma was trust is definitely important, but how important it is. Basically, what price is it? Basically, that was it. Because I knew it was important, and obviously, again, like I had to operate with the constraints of my budget, right? And it was basically figuring out how much it was worth it. Anyway, so I started participating in the auction. I arrived up to $25,000, but it kept going up, right? So pretty much very quickly it kept going up to 30, 35, and it stopped at 35.
Hey, Daniel, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Of course.
Had you ever bid on a domain before?
Oh no, this was my first ever experience. Yeah. So again, like I was completely unaware of what, again, like even small details, like how would I pay for it? Like I didn't have a credit card that had up to $30,000 limit, like small things like this. Yeah, like
clicking away.
So, but I was ready. Like I was ready to pay. Like somehow, up to that bid, like again, like I kept thinking about it. I said, okay, sure, it's expensive, but it was probably the only opportunity that I have. Like I reasoned to it, but I drew the line at 25,000. Like basically, once it kept going up, I realized that again, like it was going to become an imprudent risk for me. Right, this business that haven't even started yet. I didn't even know if I'm going to get even a single customer. I didn't know anything, right? So
yeah,
I wanted to keep, basically money for me right now that I'm living off my savings and trying to build money means, it gives me a second chance to try something else if this works out, right? So I was basically trading off that optionality of doing some other thing, right? If this wasn't working out, right? So it was, it's how
so
I
it's
was
like
thinking
the risk reward matrix access was just at the tipping point at 25,000.
At the point, yeah, exactly. So, and this is all very hard to quantify, right? So I was just playing it by gut feel, right? So I stopped there. So it went over, and again, like I forgot about it. I thought, okay, it's lost. I sort of convinced myself that it's okay. Maybe if the business succeeds in the future, I'll pursue it again, right? And if not, I'll just make do without it. But then again, like another fascinating thing that happened, apparently the top two bidders didn't complete the purchase, which I thought was quite a bizarre. But actually, I thought it was quite a strange thing again in the process. Like I was very tempted to bid at 35,000 and keep bidding, right? Which it seems to me very unfair that there were bidders bidding at that price range that didn't even complete the purchase.
Yeah.
But anyway, GoDaddy called me once at 6 a.m. in the morning and said, look, if you're still interested, pay within 24 hours and it's yours. Like the top two bidders bailed out. And again, like I had gone, like those 24 hours gone again, even like I had already set the line at 25,000. I had between then and the time I thought I lost the bid, I had already convinced myself that it was okay to to start without it. So I had again went through the process of is this still worth it? But I went to it, right? So I ended up acquiring it, and that was the story. In terms of results, to be honest, I think it's too early to say. Like I don't really know. So the business so far had, it started well. It's encouraging. I have my first 50 paid customers, which is sort of in line with what I was hoping to do by this time. I don't really have a before and after comparison, and even if I did, it's probably the numbers are still too small to infer anything.
That's okay. We'll have you back in a year.
Maybe, yes. But I think I definitely appreciate more, like it was me reflecting, right, and then like looking at it from a different angle, right, because as we were saying before, right, before I was saying pretty much like there was nearly no value in it, but now I definitely, and I've put my money to where my mouth is to believe that there is some value, some significant value, right, in the signaling aspect at least, right? Even if the discoverability is unlikely to be important for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much the whole
That's a
story.
great story. So you had no plan on how to make payment. I mean, clearly you had the money, but you didn't have a plan on how to make payment. And GoDaddy said you have 24 hours. What'd you
Yes.
do?
So I had a credit card with Chase. I had two credit cards with a bank with Chase that neither of them had enough limit, but them combined had enough. And then I called the bank, and they actually very quickly put all my limit on one of the cards, and that was sort of enough. And I just paid by credit card basically the whole sum. I think if it didn't work out, I would have likely reached out to GoDaddy to see what other arrangements, but I didn't get to that step, so I don't know. You probably know more than me what people tend to do. But again, yeah, it was. I think for me, if I got something out of it, it was again like this whole experience of how domain ordering and auctioning and things like that works. I don't think the lesson was worth $25,000, so hopefully I get something more out of it. But there was a little bit of that.
Well,
that
you got
benefit
quite
as
this story. That is a very unusual story. I mean, I read your article on medium.com that you wrote about a year ago, why I
Yeah.
left my 500K job
Yes.
at Amazon. And this too, you have another really
Yeah.
unusual story.
And
Most entrepreneurs don't, like, this is not the typical acquisition process, but this is very interesting to hear how you went through the thought and decision making process 3 times.
yeah.
First, when you reached out to the broker, then at the auction when you lost, and then when they gave you a second chance.
Yeah.
And each time you really concluded this, the credibility, the signaling was so vital to what you're doing. How many startups do you see with all your friends and in your general ecosystem start and fail or change paths?
No, it's. I think it's very common, right, for startups to change paths at least. I think it depends a lot on the type of startups, the way they are backed. Most likely, like mostly, I think the big category difference is whether you have investors or not. Right? I think once you take investments, there's certain expectations. If it looks like you're not going to them, you basically you get forced to either change paths or quit. Right? I think in my case, or in the type of bootstrapped businesses that I'm doing, where costs are low in terms of operating cost, even though developing was quite expensive, but now running it is quite low. The odds of failure are quite low, right? Because it's not really taking much time for me to operate. It's not expensive for me. Basically, even the front 50 customers that I have, they're pretty much already breaking even with all my expenses, right? And sort of, it's like the worst case scenario. Here is a slow success, I call it, right? That this takes 5 years, 10 years. And I'm like, this is the type of business that I'm willing to wait for it, right? I have nobody pressuring me. I could do other things on the side as well, which I'm doing, right? Some other small side projects. It's again, like, it's sort of, it's how I've been thinking about the risk taking in this case, right? I didn't want to take on something with lots of obligations that has a high likelihood of failing, right? Because as we discussed before, right, this is basically I'm taking a very risk-averse approach. I would call it. So it's basically I'm trying to make decisions such that this lifestyle that I'm enjoying a lot doesn't get taken away from me, right? So rather than trying to maximize profit, right, or trying to sort of maximize my opportunities, I'm just making decisions where I'm minimizing the chance that I have to go back to full-time employment, essentially. And again, this thinking, right, sort of played a factor in my sort of where I drew the line of how much I wanted to spend in my domain, right? Again, just because my runway is my savings balance, right, and that was sort of chipping in from it. But no, I mean, all business are speculative at the end of the day, right? So I think sort of one way of mitigating that risk is just to have plans for either do other things simultaneously or just making sure that something that you're running that are the expenses are low, so that sort of there's very little cost in letting it develop, and not have to sort of the timer, right, where you have to make it work within 6 months, otherwise you have to sort of dissolve everything. I try to avoid those situations.
That's really, really good advice, and clearly comes from someone who's been around it a lot and seen a lot. You took your time making this decision. So what do you expect in the coming year for userbase.com?
Yeah, I think I'm expecting slow success. I'm expecting again, like, this is the kind of business that it's not an impulse buy, or you announce it and people are just going to get the credit card out of their wallet and pay immediately. I have to wait for people to have an idea to build a website or a web application or a mobile app. And then sort of they need to consider their options, and then they need to choose me, right? So there's that lag between the product being available and then sort of the customer's timing and lines with them being ready to do something about it. So I think so far all the signals are encouraging. As we said before, sort of lots of people tried it. Some became paying customers. This weekend, actually, there were a couple of my customers that announced their own web applications. Right? It was sort of the first time that my customers are building their own businesses on top of my business, which is good.
That's exciting.
At least the first time that I know about it. So I think I don't really have a plan. Actually, I'm not a big fan of even planning, right? I think I sort of like to keep options open, and I take it step by step, play it by ear. Definitely, if there was a plan, definitely I intend to keep this going, right? I have no intention of, if this doesn't reach some goal, I'm going to shut it down, or I'm going to do that or this, right? So this is basically keep improving slowly, like keep listening to customer feedback, adjust accordingly, and basically, yeah, keep iterating, right? I think for me personally, in the meantime, since sort of I still haven't yet, I still can't claim that I have made self-employment completely sustainable, right? I'm still sort of not earning enough money from user base to sort of pay all the bills. I'm still potentially exploring other small side things. Like, for example, I wrote an ebook recently, which did very well, about my sort of a technical book about sort of some of the work I did at Amazon, which did spectacularly well. Actually, I did believe it. I was quite surprised. I managed to sell. So I released this on Christmas Day. So about, I think, 11 weeks, and managed to sell about $70,000 of worth of pretty much, this was an ebook, right? So my costs were practically nothing. And this was all marketed on Twitter, right? So we talked about it before, right? Where I started building this audience, right? Which I've been documenting my whole journey, right? All these details that we're talking about, even the domain process, right? I shared on Twitter when the first time I reached out to the broker, and the broker came back with 100K. I tweeted about it, got some attention, people were interested, and same about the auction, right? After I thought I lost it, I posted that I lost it, right? And sort of, it's all pieces of information that helped me gather, I think, about 21,000 followers on Twitter, where I started pretty much from nothing last year, all pretty much by documenting what I'm doing. And so writing this book was another idea, like an experiment. I time boxed pretty much a month of working on it. I didn't even spend a month. I spent about 20 days, basically. It was a topic that pretty much wrote itself. Right? It was something that I understood really well, and I just had to basically articulate it in words. And I've put it on this platform called Gumroad, which allows you to sort of sell digital creations, like things like that, like ebooks or software, very easily without having to set up merchant accounts with banks and so on and so forth. And I just tweeted about it on Twitter. Like basically, I wrote this, so I would be honored if you check it out. And pretty much on the first day, I sold like $10,000, which was quite incredible. Again, like I had never wrote anything. I had never been paid for for writing before. And since then, sort of sales have obviously declined since the launch day, but I'm still making a couple of $100 a day. Like I expect them to slow down, because I think that's the nature of this business, right? We get like this big spike initially. And but basically this opened up another opportunity for me, right? That I could probably do something like this again, like, and sort of supplement my income. And I'm thinking, in fact, I was just thinking about it this week. Probably my audience basically on Twitter has been very curious about the process of building an audience. Right? It's sort of, I've been talking about it a lot in terms of how I'm sort of being able to, again, like without pretty much any social media experience until last year. I've been just experimenting. We started with that blog post that you mentioned, and then sort of settled on Twitter. And I think this is another topic that there's lots of interest about, that I could probably write something on. That again, like, could sort of be another, it's part of the whole entrepreneurial journey, right? Sort of basically multiple income streams. It's something that I underestimated in the beginning. When I left, I thought that I'm going to sort of focus on one thing, and then if it doesn't work out, I'll do something else. Like, so I had like this idea that things are going to be, I'll do things in series rather than parallel. But now I'm realizing that it's even at the cost of efficiency or losing some focus, that it's nearly easier to do some things in parallel. It's just, you know, these things are very randomness laden, I call them, like where you're starting a business that you don't know if it's going to work out. If it's going to work out, you don't know when or how long you're going to have to wait. I think having like 2 or 3 things in parallel makes it just more comfortable psychologically. You're just not feeling you have all the eggs in one basket, right? If you have this and this and that, right, it's just easier to shift attention to one or the other sometimes, right? And it just tames the uncomfortable, uncertain part of it, right, a little bit.
I think that's a quotable quote.
Yeah.
It tames the uncertain, uncomfortable part of it. You're right, very much so. So your ebook, I do want to give you a little shout out, gumroad.com. And if you just search like AWS Good Parts,
AWS Good Parts,
right away.
Yes.
And this book is essentially, it helps people understand which parts of AWS, what features they may be missing or what they may not need to utilize. So it kind of gives a guide, I would say, like an expert levels guide to using AWS.
Yes, so I've chosen most technical guides tend to be the exhaustive, comprehensive guides where you get like A to Z, all the details, all the quirks. This is a very, like, this AWS, right? It's the sort of the product that Amazon sells for developers, right? But it's super extensive, right? There's like thousands of small features and things like that. And sort of in this book, I focus on the most important parts, right? That's why sort of it's not an exhaustive guide. It's just the really, really valuable things that if you were to know about them, I think it's like 95% of what you need to know about, right? And it's meant to be a dense exchange of information, right? It's short, it goes straight to the point. Again, like, it leaves out details by design, so that it doesn't get into the weeds, things that are not very important. And I think this format worked well for both things. Again, like, because I time boxed it, I wanted to do something quickly. I didn't want to invest a year, like some of friends of mine that have written technical books, like, spent like months and years, right? And working with a publisher, and like, it's a big full-time commitment. This was, again, like an experiment. I had no idea whether I was going to sell 1 copy or 100 copies. right? The outcome was definitely beyond what I expected, like selling, I think I sold like over 2,000, I think 2,100 or something like that copies so far. But at the time, again, like it was another speculative risk, right? Speculative bet,
My
and I wanted to
favorite,
keep it small.
I like when you posted on Twitter, you're like, I'm kind of honored that
Yeah.
someone used fraud
Oh yeah,
to buy my book.
that was a
Like,
funny.
that's when you've made it, Daniel. I'm going to
Yes.
steal someone's credit card so I can buy this.
Yes.
Hilarious. So, I think that our audience would love to hear just a little bit about your Twitter journey.
Yeah.
So, you're saying you started on Twitter a year ago.
Mhm.
I'm looking, you've only posted, a little over 6,000 times.
Yeah.
I guess in a year, that is a
Yeah.
lot. But you have 21.2 thousand followers. And you are an extraordinary subject matter expert. So I think, you always have to look at what you have to offer first. But then so the first thing you did was write the post for Medium on and a great title, Why I Quit My $500,000 a year job at Amazon. And then just from there, what was your journey?
Yeah.
What tips do you have for others?
No, yeah, this started again. It wasn't part of my initial plan to focus on building an audience, but it was literally in the first week. Like I remember, so I left my job on February 1st, like it was a Friday. On Monday, like I sat here at the same desk and I was thinking of I'm going to start building something, building a product. But very quickly, I had a little bit of a small crisis. I was imagining myself spending 2 months, 6 months building something, and then I announce it, and nobody shows up, right? And then what, right? So I had heard from other people, right, that it's good to have an audience. I didn't even know what it meant, to be honest. Like it was like a vague term that I heard before. So I spent that week, instead of trying to build a product, trying to imagine, to be honest, researching a little bit what building an audience meant, and sort of trying to think what I had that I could offer, right, that might be interesting.
But again, look at how you thought at the end. When I launch, who's going to buy it? That's so important. It doesn't matter how great your product is if either there's no one to sell it to, or you've spent all your money creating it and you don't have the outlet to sell it. So I see you did that on Twitter and on your domain name. You're like, where am I going to buy this? And how am I going to be positioned well in that?
No, absolutely. I think when you have skin in the game, that's when it's your money, your life, your business, these things nearly become automatic, right? It's I think, and that's I think what changed. That's why I didn't think about the audience before, because once I realized that this is important, right? This is sort of something in me made me realize it, right? It's sort of so. So again, I kept thinking, what is it, and what do I have already? That's how I started thinking that I could share and maybe get some attention, and then again, like play it by ear and see where it goes. And the first thing I wrote was that blog post, and the inspiration came because like the week before, I had basically told all my colleagues at Amazon like that I was leaving. And I thought I was going to be basically telling them in 15 minutes, okay, I'm leaving, doing something else. But the discussions, most of them ended up taking like 3 hours. Like I ended up spending time in the office until 7, 8 in the evening, just talking with my peers. And I could sense there was lots of interest. Like, why are you leaving? Like things were working out so well. It's very interesting. And others were telling me that they had other ideas themselves, and we kept discussing it. So I sensed that could be an interesting topic, right? To just share my perspective of an unusual way of leaving a career that was working out well. And I think, to be honest, I think I was a bit lucky. I wrote it on Medium. I posted it on a couple of places, like there's a Hacker News community, and there's like Reddit and a couple of places. And got ton of visits. I think got something like 40,000 views in the first couple of days. Got picked up by a few sort of high-profile people on Twitter. And it got me my first, I think it got me my first 800 followers. I started from pretty much zero, and those couple of days. And then I kept pretty much building slowly from it. I think initially, I did, like the next couple of weeks, I wrote a few other blog posts, pretty much sort of like sharing a bit of details about my financial planning, about how I allocated my savings and how I dealt with health insurance, life insurance, and other things that I thought were interesting. Got a little bit of more extra attention. But I settled on Twitter as my platform of choice because, I mean, writing a blog post takes time, right? I mean, that blog post took me a couple of days to do it, right? And Twitter just felt more natural in terms of documenting something as it's happening. Basically, I realized that that's where the interest is. Like, people seem to be very, very fascinated by following a story along in real time, right? Because I think when you're explaining a story, you know, in retrospective, right, sort of, you always get the sense like you never really know what the author is leaving out, just, you know, sharing only the good parts and like leaving out all the other things that fail and whatever. But I think sort of I sense that there's interest, right? And, you know, let me just explain little by little what I'm doing, how I'm thinking about options. I again, like, it's very hard to measure in the beginning. Like, I was just experimenting with sharing different things, and I was sort of sensing that just by people responding and people liking my tweets and engaging, that there's interest in journey documentation, basically. And it's what I kept doing. And I think initially the following started to grow after those initial 800 followers by engaging with other people, right? And by basically replying to people that ask me questions like, how did you do that? And sort of, it's pretty much word of mouth, right? It's initially it was quite slow. Nowadays, I see the manifestation of word of mouth pretty much every day. I like wake up and I see notifications on my phone, like people saying, you should check out the Vassallo's Twitter account, you should check out user base, you should check out this. Like, these are strangers that I don't know, but, you know, but they know me a little bit just by following me, and they're just recommending me to their friends.
Yeah.
And this was happening even in the beginning at a much lower scale, but I think this is how the growth started, right? Where you get sort of a small base of people that have started to know you a little bit. Sometimes they email you, you communicate back, and sort of you form a little bit of a relationship, and they keep telling their friends about you, right? And it just keeps growing like that. And no, this was a fascinating dynamic and very fascinating experience as well. And probably I would say that my biggest asset, if you were to call it that way, that I've built over this first 12 months has been the audience, right? Because I think it's just the ability to be able to announce something and somebody is listening back is super valuable, right? Like the book, for like to try to measure it in financial terms, like the book, I could have written it like 12 months ago, right? As soon as I left the job, but I'm pretty certain I wouldn't have sold any, right? Maybe a couple of friends that would have sort of
Felt
known me
bad
personally, felt bad for me, exactly. The fact that like it managed to sell so well, right, to make $70,000 and just very quickly. And it wasn't necessarily my own followers that bought it, right? It was just this effect where some did, obviously, but some just mentioned it to other people, right? And just said, you might want to check out this book, right, from this guy, right? And it's fascinating. Like the tweet where I announced the book got something like 400,000 views, right, which quite way beyond my normal organic reach of typical 20,000. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite incredible, right? It's sort of, I think social media has made word of mouth thrive again, right? Like after nearly a century dominated by big businesses, sort of dominating advertising and marketing by like one way, you know, TV ads and expensive marketing, it has allowed, you know, somebody just with very limited resources, like to do something and just reach people just by word of mouth, like
Yeah.
organically.
Yeah. You're a smart guy. I really feel like you are going to go
Oh,
into
thanks.
places. So Daniel, everybody really wants to know what it's like to work at Amazon,
Oh, yeah.
especially in the cloud tech area.
Yeah.
Give us some details.
Yeah, so Amazon has a reputation of being a bit of a ruthless employer, and I think it's a bit exaggerated. I think there's a culture of big tech, I call it, right, where Amazon, I think it's quite similar to any other big tech company like Microsoft or Apple or Netflix and so on and so forth. I can't speak from first-hand experience, but from other people that I worked with that explains that things are very similar. I think the part at Amazon is that I think if you like, or if you flourish, or if you thrive in a structured environment with still some amount of liberty, right? Amazon is a really great environment because I think it allows, especially technical engineers and product managers and people that are building products, digital products, to make several decisions locally within a small team. Like I was in a team of like, I think it never was more than 10 people. It was averaged between 5 and 10 people. And we made lots of decisions locally without having to ask for permissions from directors and general managers and so on and so forth. With some exceptions. Obviously, there were other things like pricing and other important things that had to go all the way up. And that, I think, especially in the early part of my career, was really important to me, right? I think I would have left much sooner if every small decision had to be like, had like lots of red tape and lots of bureaucracy, like to get something done. As my career evolved, there things did become more bureaucratic. Like I was getting involved into bigger projects that involved much more people, more stakeholders, and throughout basically in the last couple of years there, my job evolved to, even though I was a programmer, I had barely written a line of code. In the last 2 years there, I was basically point of contact between the team of programmers and my managers and directors, and it's where it's where the company believed I was more valuable at, and I did get some satisfaction, right, from getting everyone aligned. And but again, as we discussed before, that wasn't something that I could imagine myself doing for a long time. But no, I think all in all, look, big tech in general, right, the big companies, Amazon is one of them. I think it's definitely, I would highly recommend it, especially for people just starting out their career. I think you learn a lot, especially initially. Pay is very good and it grows very quickly. Again, like it grew beyond my expectations. And I think you get the opportunity to see how things get done, right, without suffering the consequences on your own, right, on your own skin, right? So it's just that experience of seeing things being built, mistakes getting made, right, with a little bit of insulation from the consequences, right? So yeah, I would definitely, I would definitely recommend Amazon, like despite me leaving there. And I got a lot out of it. Probably, I think if I were to look back, I would have wished that the 8 years were a bit more condensed into like 4 years or something like that. But you can't really say, right? I think it's the whole period that ends up making you who you are, right? So it's hard to tell in hindsight.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing all sorts of different arenas. Truly, Daniel, I'm interested to see where you go. You are a fascinating thinker. You have that social knack for catching on to what interests people and how to utilize that. I think user base is going to be very successful, but I'm sure you are going to be very successful.
Thank
So
you.
promise me you'll come on in a year.
Of course.
Good.
Definitely.
All right. We'll say goodbye to our network. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Tess, for having me.
Of course.